Five Nights at Freddy's is a game series known by many. The genius behind this series is known by Scott Cawthon, who had some past experience with making short games, mostly intended for Christian audiences before making Five Nights at Freddy's. Most, if not all, of his games at this point were given very negative reviews. One of his games, known as Chipper & Sons Lumber Co., was criticized because the characters looked too scary for a kid's game. Before giving up on game development, he decided to take one more shot, so he made Five Nights at Freddy's. On the surface, FNAF is a simple enough concept, right? Instead of making another game aimed at children, Scott took the criticism from his other games as inspiration to make a horror game. And, well, we all know what happened after that. Five Nights at Freddy's was released on August 8th, 2014, and it blew up. Like, that's an understatement, really. All the popular YouTubers at the time were playing it, overreacting to the scary jump scares. Countless fans and YouTubers started speculating the lore, all the kids started going to school with their cool Freddy backpacks and beanies. I was one of those kids. Everyone seemed to be talking about this game, and it took the spotlight for quite some time. After the first game, the series would then put out more games, books, merch, and even a movie, which we still know nothing about, but hey, it's the thought that counts. It is safe to say that FNAF was a phenomenon that definitely does not happen every day. So, what exactly made this series so great? I thought I would go through the series and just take a look back at each game, starting with the very first game, Five Nights at Freddy's. Like I said before, FNAF looks simple on the surface, which gameplay-wise, yes it is. The complicating part with this franchise is the deeply hidden lore found in the games through hidden messages, minigames, and, stuff like that. I guess we should start with what this game is even about. Five Nights at Freddy's takes place inside Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which is a Chuck E. Cheese style pizzeria. You, the player, are the security guard who is working the night shift. The thing is, the animatronics in this pizzeria, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, are actually trying to stuff you inside of a Freddy suit. Yeah, they're trying to kill you. So you need to keep them out of your office until 6 AM. Then you move on to the next night. In order to do this, you need to check the cameras around the pizzeria to track each of the animatronics' movements. Once they reach your door, you need to close it on them. However, all the animatronics behave differently. Each of them has a specific path they take. Bonnie eventually ends up at your left door, while Chica ends up on your right. Foxy will also sprint into your office if you don't check on him through the cameras. And Freddy never actually spawns outside of your door, so you need to track his moves very carefully or else you're dead. You may be thinking, well, why don't you just keep the doors closed at all times? Well, using the doors, cameras, and lights, they all use power. The more things you use at once, the faster your power drains, which can be tracked using these little bars in the corner of your screen. If you run out of power before 6 AM, then, well, you're dead. Survive all 5 nights, then you win and get your paycheck at the end. See? Simple enough, right? The gameplay in this game is very, and I mean very, simple once you get the hang of things. Heck, even with enough practice, you'll be able to predict each of the animatronics' moves without even looking at the cameras too often. This makes FNAF 1 very easy compared to future entries, where in those games, it is much harder to keep track of everyone at once. The gameplay in FNAF 1 requires a lot of strategy and a little bit of luck at times, but when you get the hang of things, the game is really easy. But that's just the gameplay side of things. Visually, this game actually looks pretty impressive, despite the graphics mostly being GIFs. The audio design in this game is next level though. The ambient noises and sound effects really added the horror of this game. In fact, without the audio, this game would probably not even be scary in the slightest. The visuals mixed with the audio just give off this creepy, eerie vibe. It's great. The character designs of the crew are also really well done. The designs achieve scariness, but without trying too hard, if you know what I mean. They achieve the same effect that real-life pizza restaurant animatronics do. They aren't intentionally creepy, but they just give off a certain vibe. Let's look at Freddy, for example, which, this is a little off topic, but it's kind of weird that we don't see him much. Besides killing you when you run out of power, his first appearance during the night is halfway through night 3, but whatever. Anyway, let's talk about the actual character design itself. Like I said before, Scott really nailed his design. This generally looks terrifying even without any hyper-realistic features. The same can be said about everyone else, and especially Chica in my opinion. I feel like the character designs in FNAF series should be a lesson to the people that more blood does not always equal more scary. The character designs in FNAF 1 are actually scary, but it's a realistic kind of scary, if you know what I mean. FNAF also holds some extra goodies as well. Let's begin with false advertising. After beating all 5 nights, you unlock a super secret special 6th night, which is just harder than night 5. And after you beat the 6th night, you unlock a very super secret custom night mode. Or night 7. Let's just fix this one more time. In this mode, you can freely adjust the AI of every animatronic, but in order to get the 3rd star in the main menu, you need to set every character to the highest difficulty, which is infamously known as 2020-2020 mode, or 420 mode if you will. This mode is actually not that difficult, just go from door to door and constantly flip your cameras and you'll be just fine. If you beat Custom Night on any mode, then instead of getting a paycheck, you actually get fired. Lame. The extra content in FNAF 1 is honestly more than enough considering the length of the main game. We basically get an infinite number of nights to play if you really think about it. Anyway, all that stuff is just scratching the surface. What FNAF is really known for is the the lore. It's known for the lore. Now thankfully, FNAF 1 doesn't have too much lore, it starts getting real in FNAF 2, but anyways, I'm going to try to explain this as simply as possible. Pray for me. I'm also not going to be getting into any theories, just the stuff we do know 100%. The main source of any sort of backstory in FNAF 1 is the phone calls that you receive in the beginning of each night. The phone guy, voiced by Scott Cawthon himself, is a former security guard who is here to guide you through your shift. He basically explains that the animatronics are not normal and that they are trying to get you. He also mentions the Bite of 87, which we'll get into at a later time. By night 4, things start to get a little weird. He ends up dying, at least so we think, in the night 4 phone call, and that's pretty much all we hear from him. I guess the actual main source of what is going on in this game comes from the newspapers that could be found in one of the cameras. If you look very closely and cover one eye, you can actually read them. They basically say that one day, a man dressed in a bunny costume was found luring 5 children into a backstage area. The children were never found and are presumed dead. The newspapers also go over how people visiting the restaurant noticed the animatronics acting funny. They gave off a horrible smell and resembled dead bodies. It is also mentioned how the animatronics had signs of blood and mucus coming out of them. If it wasn't obvious already, our killer here stuffed the bodies of the dead kids inside of the animatronics and the souls would then possess them, which causes them to roam freely at night. Now, there are a lot of theories on who the killer actually is. We do actually eventually end up finding his real name, but that's for another video. If you didn't know a single thing about this franchise before watching this video, then you may be wondering, well, 5 missing kids, but there's only 4 animatronics. Well, that's what you think. During a normal shift, there is a very, and I mean very, rare chance that you will encounter Golden Freddy, who will crash your game if you look at him for too long. If you want to see what his jump scare looks like, then you can go to the custom night menu and change the values so they read 1987. Their style is a pretty cool Easter egg. How the lore is presented in this game is honestly what made it so popular in the first place. The lore is pretty much optional if you know what I mean, and that was honestly a good choice considering that this game was supposed to be simple. Now, a huge problem with this game in the series going forward is how the lore brings more questions than answers, which mainly leaves us as a community to figure out for ourselves. Oh well, the hidden lore is still cool nonetheless. So that's pretty much everything to cover about the first game. I truly believe that this game stood out among the crowd of other indie horror games, mainly because of its uniqueness. The whole Pizzeria animatronic stuff was a completely new concept back in the day, and it still holds up very well. What doesn't hold up very well is some of the visuals and other things in this game. Another thing that I want to talk about is the stigma that FNAF is for kids. Well, yeah, most of the merchandise is targeted towards children. I mean, dude, come on now. I don't think murdering 5 kids and brutally stuffing their corpses into animatronic costumes is something you would see on Disney Channel, but here we are, I guess. Now, for an indie horror game in 2014, this was really impressive. However, nowadays, it's honestly kind of laughable. Don't get me wrong, the visuals and audio in this game work amazingly for what the game is trying to achieve. It's just not as convincing as other FNAF games, if you know what I mean. That being said, out of all the FNAF games that Scott developed by himself, yeah, this one's definitely the best. Future installments of this series, especially Security Breach, seem like they don't know what they want to achieve. The thing with FNAF 1 is that it has a goal it wants to achieve, being a simple yet scary horror game. That's what every FNAF game should want to achieve. Every FNAF game after the first had some sort of gimmick that was forced into the game. This doesn't necessarily make the other games bad, I'm just saying that it made the other games worse than FNAF 1, but it's honestly whatever. FNAF 1 as a standalone game is fantastic. For what it is without comparing it to anything else at all, I'll give it a 7 out of 10, mainly because it has its flaws. The more I play it, the more I notice it's kind of buggy, to be honest. Not to mention, some of the parts of this game just look god-awful even for 2014 standards. But with all of its flaws aside, the game is great. I'll definitely recommend buying this to anyone with a PC. Just for the love of God, don't buy this game on console. So that pretty much wraps up this video. I really want to do more videos like this one in the future, so please give some feedback if you have any. But with all that being said, guys, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.